Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen speaking out on the United States' relationship with China earlier today. Now, she described the relationship as, quote, tense, but also explained why it's very important for both countries to maintain ties. Let's take a listen.
The United States will assert ourselves when our vital interests are at stake, but we do not seek to decouple our economy from China's. A full separation of our economies would be disastrous for both countries. It would be destabilizing for the rest of the world. Rather, we know that the health of the Chinese and U.S. economies is closely linked. A growing China that plays by the rules can be beneficial for the United States.
All right, joining us now, China Beige Book International Managing Director Shehzad Qazi. Shehzad, great to have you back here at the desk. So we just heard from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. They're stressing the importance of the relationship between the U.S. and China. Is it possible to have a positive relationship given the fact that tensions are so high?
Look, you can have a relationship that increasingly becomes stabilized. We're not there yet, and I don't think we're going to be there for a while. We have a lot more instability to wade through first.
Stability specifically related to what?
So instability, I think, because we've got a decoupling that is absolutely going to happen, counter to what the Secretary said today. In areas of technology, in areas of financial services, critical supply chains, I think it is going to happen. That's almost inevitable. Not a full decoupling, but certainly this path that we're about to get into. And I think this means a lot more tension lies ahead than perhaps elected officials and cabinet members or in the administration are willing to say publicly.
What's the economic impact of that potentially?
Well, look, I mean, if we begin a process of reshoring, et cetera, there is certainly an inflation aspect to all of that. There is an aspect of having to invest a lot more in America's domestic industries and parts of the economy here in different parts of the country and so forth. So it carries certainly a very serious economic implications.
All right, we've got one more piece of video from the Yellen speech. Let's take a listen.
The United States proceeds with confidence in its long-term economic strength. We remain the largest and most dynamic economy in the world. We also remain firm in our conviction to defend our values and national security. Within that context, we seek a constructive and fair economic relationship with China. Both countries need to be able to frankly discuss difficult issues, and we should work together when possible for the benefit of our countries and the world.
Those difficult issues, what's at the top of the list, and why did I not hear her say Taiwan in this entire speech?
Yeah, I think, one of the things the administration is working really hard to do right now is look like they don't want to be mean to the Chinese government. And I think the fact that Taiwan was left out is very telling because that's incredibly important. The top of the list, really, quite frankly, is the fact that we've got a trade relationship which hasn't worked out the way it was supposed to. China has not lived up to its WTO commitments, as is well known. But also, again, some of the national security concerns around the fact that we've got technology imports and we've got this reliance on China as a single supplier for many of our critical inputs that no longer works.
Shehzad, if we do see a shift here, if we're not as reliant as the Biden administration wants us to be here on China going forward, is that going to contribute even more to the inflationary pressures that we're already seeing here potentially?
It could. This is a long-term play out, right? So we won't feel it right away, quite frankly, because nothing is going to happen to make that shift right away. It remains to be seen, what kind of subsidies are provided, what kind of policy ultimately is rolled out. These are the sorts of things I think congressional officials are battling over. They're only now really beginning to think about it. So a lot more work has to be done in D.C. before we even see what the ideas look like policy-wise.
Last couple of days, we've seen Apple CEO Tim Cook over in India opening a couple of new stores. They're moving some production there as well. Will we see more of that from other major global corporations in the future? And can India be the new China?
Maybe in certain areas, India can be the new China. The fact is you can't just pick up and create a new iPhone city in a new country overnight. So there are limits. And I'm not sure we want new Chinas to begin with. That said, I think CEOs are feeling a lot of political pressure right now, which says you need to decouple from China. The problem is they don't understand what the rules and laws are because the lawmakers aren't doing that part of their job. So I think we need to see sort of what this looks like ultimately when the lawmakers decide just what type of decoupling is intended and needed.
Why not? You said we don't want new Chinas? Why not when we've got India, who's not a human rights abuser, for one, and who doesn't force technology transfers and steal our blueprints from all our technology?
So I think the China experiment tells us that putting all our eggs in one basket is certainly dangerous. So perhaps we do want some friend-shoring and near-shoring and figure out what allies could potentially be part of that supply chain solution we're looking for. But I would certainly discourage against thinking of India as being sort of the one main basket where everything needs to go from China.
Shehzad, what does the rebound look like in China right now, the economic activity? Is it keeping up with what maybe we had expected here going back a couple of months?
Yeah, look, I think the good news out of China is that things are getting better, especially compared to the fourth quarter. The consumer, is starting to get reactivated again. But when you look at Chinese official data, we're starting to see some pretty funky mathematics going on somewhere in there. A lot of the numbers are just not adding up. And you're seeing 10.6% beat in retail. You're seeing a massive GDP print. This seems to be a bit of exaggeration going on, and the statistics are not adding up internally. I think there's a positive consumer story coming, especially in April and May. The government may have pulled some of that forward.
You always take their numbers with a grain of salt. Quickly, a TikTok ban, does it happen?
Hard to say. A lot of folks in D.C. would like to do it, but again, the administration, as usual, is stumbling, not being able to make a decision one way or another.
So you say no. I'm trying to force you off the fence here.
I think as the closer we get to the elections, it'll be hard to stay away from it.
All right. Shehzad, Qazi, always great to have you here. China Beige book. Thanks so much for coming in.